All right, team. We are back in the Fireside PM podcast, and I have Mustafa Capadia here, who is a fellow Zoogler and a product consultant. And we're going to talk a little bit about specific AI usage by product managers and maybe a quick demo. And then we'll talk about how organizations more broadly can embrace and make full use of AI. So excited to get in there. But before we do that, Mustafa, maybe a little bit of background about yourself for those who aren't familiar.
Good. Tom, thanks for having me. It's kind of weird and wild that we both worked at Google at the same time, but we never crossed paths. But Google, of course, is such a big organization, especially being in product space. But I'm glad that we connected, and thank you for having me on the show. So quick introduction. I'll keep it short. You know what? My mom always told me to not talk about myself. So I think of myself as a CPO turned consultant, right? Like you, Tom, I probably have about 20, 25 years of experience in product. I was global head of product and innovation at Google. Prior to that, I was working for IBM, in which I was both a product and a consultant, and then, of course, product manager at Deloitte and Fidelity. And I've been product space for a very long time. But for the last year and a half, 2 years, I've been really focused on how you can use AI to make PMs more productive, and especially product organizations more effective and efficient, right? And I love what I'm doing. In fact, I almost fell into it. I almost missed the boat, but that's a whole different story.
Yeah, well, thank you for the quick intro, Mustafa. And are you based on the West Coast? Where are you?
Yes, East Bay, not too far from where you are.
Right? Wonderful, wonderful. How are you seeing PMs use AI tools today? And maybe like what are some common mistakes or opportunities for kind of optimization on how they use it, other than just jumping into ChatGPT and messing around?
Yeah. Well, I see a lot of that, unfortunately. Right? In fact, most of the students and most of the clients I come in are usually in that boat in which they have played around with ChatGPT or any of the other large language models. They kind of get decent results, but they're frustrated because, quote unquote, the AI just doesn't get it, right? They don't really, and the use is very surface level, right? They use it for one or two things, but they don't really go and use the full capability of the large language models to do some of the work that they do on a daily basis that the AI can actually help a lot, right? And when I go into these organizations, usually I tell them that, listen, this is how most people use AI, but if you really want to get to the true benefit of AI, in which you really want to save 10 hours a week, if you want to become a better PM, if you want to improve your velocity, you have to start using AI very differently, right? And the way that the top PMs use AI differently is vastly different than how most of the other PMs do it.
Yeah, tell us more. What are the differences?
So to me, it really comes down to the top PMs use AI and they focus on three key dimensions, right? So think about it. Tom, goes back to our OKR mindset, right? Three key dimensions. And they look at, number one is they're looking for AI to just do things faster, right? That's an easy one. Most people can understand that, right? So it can get your job done much faster. Second is they're really looking to enhance quality. And quality really means is getting a better, much more higher quality, much more customized, much more personalized responses from the AI so that they can then make better decisions. They can actually be more innovative. They can actually do the things that they want to do so they can become a better PM and drive a bigger impact. And the last one is they really focus on what I call the effort and what I call the 80-20, right? They want AI to do 80% of the work and them doing the other 20%. What I see, coming back to your earlier question, is when most PMs use AI, it's flipped. The AI does 20% of the work, and then they end up doing the other 80% of the work. And so the top PMs just look at this tool, look at these capabilities and say, how can I do my job faster? How can I do it with better quality so I can become a better PM and have maximized my impact? And how can I do it so that I'm doing the least amount of work where AI is doing more of the heavy lifting, right? And it's much easier for me to show you
Yeah.
and to tell you. So I don't know if you want to jump into that now, or we want to wait
Let's
for
do
later.
it. Let's do it. Should I pull up? It looks like you've got Claude opened up.
I have
or-
Claude here. I'm going to focus on Claude. Actually, Claude
Mhm.
just came out with the latest update like 2 days ago. So, Tom, I've been like a kid in a Lego store. But I want to do a quick demo, right? And what I want to do is, Tom, how many times did you do sentiment analysis at Google, right? I mean, I used to have my PMs do this like almost on a weekly basis based on different sets of data. And it always used to take a lot of time. And sometimes they would do it themselves through some Excel spreadsheet or some, if they're really fancy, they can use macro, or sometimes you would use data scientists to do it. But it used to take a lot of time, right? With AI, that fundamentally changes. So what I'm going to do is a quick demo of a few nights ago. I downloaded information from the app review for the Figma, because I was playing around with Figma. I'm like, oh, let me see how I can do a quick sentiment analysis on that one. And so I want to show a demo about how top PMs use AI to actually do the sentiment analysis, and how they can go deeper and deeper and deeper and get much better quality results that go back to the 3 things that we talked about. Does that make sense? Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay.
Let's do it.
So just to kind of just do a baseline, right? So here's the Figma reviews I downloaded, and I think I have about maybe 180 rows. I wanted to keep it short simply because if you give AI a lot of data, it does take time. It does do the job, but it takes time. The other thing is I didn't really clean up anything. This is just raw data download, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the just three things, right? 3 skills that I teach my product organizations. And there's a suite of like maybe 18 or 19 skills, so I'm going to focus on 3. And I'm going to first go into a playbook, and we'll talk about that later, and we'll go into each one of these later into detail. I'm going to pull in the synthesized user feedback prompt. I'm going to go into Claude. I'm going to put it in here. I'm actually going to attach that Figma file that we just saw. And while it's doing the analysis, I'm going to share with you. How this is different. And then I am actually going to go to. I'm going to add something called a personal coach, and we'll talk more about that. It's going to take some time for it to run, but the first thing that the PMs who want to get the most out of AI do is that the way they ask questions is fundamentally different, right? Now, this is a fairly long way of asking questions, but what most PMs do, and what you mentioned earlier, is that they just play around with it, or they just ask simple questions. And so when I see PMs doing synthesis analysis or sentiment analysis, they'll just go into Claude or OpenAI and say, can you please analyze this document for sentiment analysis, right? And that's a very simple question. Now, with AI, Tom, if you ask a question, you're going to get a response. There's no magic to that one, correct? But the response that you usually get, depending on what side of the bed AI woke up in that morning, is you'll probably get a breakdown of the reviews in which you had so many 5-star reviews, so many 4-star reviews, so many of these reviews, and so on and so forth. You may get some positive feedback, negative feedback, but that's rare. And sometimes it just stalls. So the problem with having a simple answer is that it's really not actionable. And in order for you to make it actionable, then you have to end up sparring with the AI and saying, well, tell me more about these 5-star reviews. Tell me more about these 4-star reviews. And all of those things, unfortunately, take up time, right? And sometimes you end up in a rabbit hole, and that just kills the thing. And then you start saying, oh my God, AI is more work than it is, right? But if you ask questions this way, and I think if the analysis is done.
Yeah, I think proof that this is a live demo, it didn't accept your uploaded attachment.
Oh, well, let's try it again then. Let's try it now. I wonder why. And I'm going to copy the same thing. And I will tell you that I've been playing around with the latest Claude model, and so if this does not work, we can go back to the old model.
I got a feeling. I got a
saying.
good feeling it'll work this time.
There you go.
There it is.
So, just to let you guys know, Tom and I have not staged this.
Clearly.
But you can see how very quickly it gives you very actionable results. Right? So if you look at it, it gives you positive feedback and tells you what's great with it, and it can tell you how many times it's been counted. Right? Same thing with negative feedback. It tells you all the features requested and how many people requested it. It tells you all the competitors mentioned. It gives you a quick summary. So if you want to pull something into a deck, you can do that. And it can give you a quick notes, right? So very simply, just by the way I ask question, Tom, I can actually have the AI do most of the work for me. Now I just have to take what I wanted and put it into some kind of deck or a spreadsheet and then go and socialize it, right? But that's not where most of the top PMs stop, right? So we can go further. Would you like to go further?
Sure.
So let's just say that you like, let's say that I want to explore this more, right? The limited editing functionality on iPad and mobile. So let's say I want to work on this. Is this aligned with my OKRs? Let's just call it Teams OKRs. And of course, I don't know how to spell aligned. And now what I've done is it is actually going to, it's going to go through my OKRs that I've actually trained AI on. And it's actually going to tell me if it's aligned or not. It looks like it's aligned with at least 3 of the OKRs that I have for my team. And so what I've done is I've actually trained the AI on my OKRs. I've actually trained the AI on my organization, right? So now I can tell you I like OKRs. I think, okay, great. I can say, great. I want to socialize this with Lisa. What is the best way to do that? And so because I've trained it on my org chart and it kind of knows who Lisa is, and I've given certain personality traits to Lisa, so it's going to tell me that the best way to talk to Lisa is to go through this. So it tells me that Lisa is director of product for core collaboration, which is perfect. And frame it around business outcomes. This is great. I can go through this. I can pick what I want to do. I can even go further and say, who else should I socialize this with before I talk to Lisa? And so by having AI, by embedding these knowledge into AI, you can really see how it can actually make your life much easier. Like, Tom, think about it. How much effort did that take in order for just to do this right now?
Not a lot.
Yeah. And we literally did this in less than 5 minutes with 1 error, right?
Yeah.
But you can go and see that if you're a PM who is trying to figure out not just how to use AI to do sentiment analysis, but how it can actually guide you to become a better PM with very little effort, you can see how this can actually make a huge difference, right? Now, just the sentiment analysis itself can save you days of work. But being able to figure out if it's okay, how do you align with the OKRs, navigating your organization, who to talk to, who not to talk to, how to talk to them, those are the soft skills that AI can actually guide you through as well. And so now it's helping you save all that time too. So let's go back to the 3 things, right? Number 1, this is clearly much faster, right? Clearly you can see that the quality of results is much more custom, much more personalized than before. And the amount of effort it took was simply knowing how to use AI, right? And so you can see how it's easier and easier for PM to save at least 10 hours a week. Use AI to become better PMs, be more innovative, be more creative. Does that help, Tom? Does that make sense?
I'd love to
And
hear
we can go,
more.
by the way, we can go further too. There's a lot that I've trained my coach on.
Yeah.
Please.
Maybe you could talk a little bit about the process that you took to train the coach, because it sounds like it understands your current OKRs, the org structure, some of the personalities. How much training did you do and how did you do it?
Not very much. What I did was I created a digital twin, right? And the digital twin had about 5 or 6 dimensions. Number one, it talks about the company that I work for. It talks about a little bit about my role, about who I am. It talks about my organization structure. It talks about the product that I support. It talks about actually the feedback that I've received from my last review about my strengths and weaknesses. So it kind of it knows a little bit about myself. And it talks about a little bit of the company OKRs and process, right? And all of that, I've created a digital twin. And let me see if I can actually share that with you. I'm sure you guys would. Do you want to see it?
Yeah, definitely.
Let's go to.
I'm
this one was
I'm gonna
Figma,
stop
right?
sharing the screen. You let me know when you want me to. Do you want me to share this?
If you can see it, yeah. Can you see this?
Yeah. Sometimes with guests, like when they're poking around their desktop, they want me to stop sharing.
We have an open kimono policy.
All right.
Maybe you guys don't want to see the open kimono, but you can see, and this is for a fictional character called Anna. But you can see that here you have organization context, you have product overview, you actually have the role, you actually have the team structure. So here's Lisa that we talked about, right? And not just Lisa, but we also said that what are Lisa's personality traits.
Yeah.
And by the way, here's a fun fact. If you actually ever want to figure out what is a personality trait of somebody you're working for, what I tell people do is take a look at the last 10 emails. The last 10 emails, and you use AI to analyze it. AI will tell you their personality traits. You'd be surprised how much personality goes into the way people write emails.
Yeah,
right.
I could totally see that.
Right. Yeah. So here's the team structure. You have your year-end review about the key strength areas of development, organization OKRs, and product management process, right? And so you can actually use this to actually build it into the coach. And so every time you run a task, you can it now not only does it take that well-structured prompt that we just talked about, how you ask questions, but it also takes into account all that information that you put in with about you and your organization. And so it gives you much more detailed and much more customized responses. And I'm telling you, Tom, that to me, that's a secret sauce of using AI, right? To try to get it to give you responses and answers that you can do something with. Because a lot of times PMs ask a question and they get generic responses and then they get frustrated. Right?
Yeah.
And so
I was just going to say, I could see that, if you use AI off the shelf, it's kind of like a really smart, well-read person who doesn't really understand you or your business or your company. But in your case, now you've given that smart, well-read person a lot of the nuance and details, and wow, you can tell that the output is multiples more impactful now.
Yeah, and it starts with the context that you give, and it goes both into the how you ask questions matter, because I think, to me, fundamentally, what AI is teaching us is that we need to ask better questions. In order to get the most out of AI, you need to ask better questions, right? So that's the first skill. The second skill is the training piece that I just shared with you, right? I shared with you the whole profile. So you need to be able to tell AI more about the context that you live in, because we don't live in these one-dimensional worlds that the AI comes from, right? And the third one is that we went through it very quickly, is that having a personal playbook of your most popular task
Mm-hmm.
And using that each and every time makes your life so much easier. Because here's the thing, I will tell you, Tom, nobody wants to write a question like this every time.
Yeah.
You're not going to do that, right? I mean, seriously, who's going to do that, right? But the good news is that the way we write questions and the way we do well-structured prompts is that you write this once
Mm-hmm.
and you can reuse it again and again and again. Like I could have changed this from Figma to a different company and would have still worked. I could have changed it from app reviews to uh, customer feedback,
Right.
right? I could do that from ticket data, whatever data you need, you actually write it, and it's like write it once and reuse it 1,000 times, right? And if you actually do that, if you want to, I'll show you a quick glance of the playbook. There's a lot that you can do with the playbook. Do you want to put this up?
Yeah, it's shared now.
It is shared. So if you go to this playbook, these are the kind of things that we have been able to do with our clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can think about it, goes through the entire life cycle from ideation to validation to UX, UI. Oh, I have to add a few more things. By the way, prototyping is brand new, and I'm spending a lot of time on prototyping. How do you build from user stories? You go to market, leveling up your skills for leadership, troubleshooting guides. How many times have you got into AI and it's like you hit a brick wall,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so there's a whole troubleshooting guide in which you can do things so you get AI to kind of finally get it in the right direction that you want it, right? So having something like this in the playbook, which I think is skill number 3, just makes your life easier as a PM. Right?
Yeah.
You take the playbook, you take the well-structured prompt, you take the coaching piece, you mix it all together, because that's where you get 1 + 1 = 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to just doing individual. And so when I go see PMs, I see PMs maybe doing 1 or 2 of these things, but they never put it together in a way that makes sense, or they're just asking simple questions. And then when I show them this, like you know what? While I was doing this, I was actually looking at your eyes, because, and I saw your eyes just like, I'm like, oh my God, you can do that. That's exactly the reaction that I get from PMs.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I could imagine if I were an early career PM, my ability to have kind of LN+2 impact is dramatically increased versus like the folks that, back in the old days, you just had to like apprentice under a more senior PM, and over time you start to figure things out.
Yeah.
One thing I'm curious about, Mustafa, is, and this applies not just to PMs, but I think a lot of people who use AI for work artifacts and things. How do you advise early career PMs who've never done a PRD or a roadmap, and then they have a great prompt and it has great context and it gives them something, but what they don't have the ability to scan the output and be like,
I don't know what good looks like.
Yeah. And like 1 through 12 are fine, but 3 and 7 are a little messed up, and that doesn't make any sense. I need to fix that. But they wouldn't know, because it's like the kids that only use calculators and they never did the math.
Yes. So I think it's a great question. And I think, Tom, depending on where you are in your career, you end up using AI a bit differently, right? So to your question earlier about if you're just starting out, I think that having AI, so first of all, the rule I teach and the rules I tell my PMs is that number 1 is you should never take AI as face value, period. Doesn't matter who you are, right? And what AI is very good at is giving you lots of options, but you need to pick and choose the right options. And this is analysis, so that's a different piece. But let's just say that we were brainstorming user stories or features or whatever that might be, right? Number 1 is you never ask the AI to give you the one right feature that's going to work, because it will never do that. It doesn't matter how well you use all the techniques I teach. AI is not going to be telling you the one right feature. But AI is great at giving you 20 options, right? So doing that. Now, Of that 20 options, how do you know which ones are the right ones, right? This is where the personalization piece that I just talked about comes into place, right? So even though that they may not know that it's the right, it may be the right user story to go after or the feature to go after, they can, at the very minimum, check it against the OKRs.
Mm-hmm.
At a very minimum, check it again and see, well, how is Lisa going to react to this, right? And so it allows them to do things that, especially when I was a junior PM, I was afraid to ask.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because now you have the LLM. Now, again, the LLM is not going to tell you the exact full answer, but it's directionally correct, which is better than what I had when I started off as a PM at Fidelity. Because I was like, I have 20 questions, but I'm afraid of asking 19 because I'm going to look stupid. So I'm going to ask that one question.
Yeah.
Right? And so AI can help you just level up really fast.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It has an unlimited budget for very dumb, basic questions. There's no shame. It's the most psychologically safe place you can ask, like, oh, what does this acronym that I probably should know, but I don't?
Yeah.
What does it really mean?
I agree. Which is, it's funny you say that, but in the playbook, you saw the level up section.
Mm-hmm.
The level up section is really there to actually help PMs do that, right? In fact, one of the prompts there is actually going to not just tell you what XYZ prompt means, but it's actually going to tell you the answer, and then it's going to quiz you. And based on that response, it will give you more explanation, and then it'll ask you the questions again. So it's actually dynamic.
Yeah. Fantastic.
And so you can do a whole lot of things. All it requires is really understanding how to use this tool. Because at the end of the day, it's just a tool, right? I mean, it's a very fancy calculator. But like anything else, you've seen people do this, right? You see people do that with Excel, right? You can have Excel in which I use it like a basic person, but then there's others who just whiz by it and create complete CRMs and project tracking and Trello boards out of Excel because they just know how to do it, right? And they've unlocked a whole bunch of productivity out of it. So.
Yeah, Mustafa, this has been great. I'd love to zoom out now and talk a little bit about, let's say you are a founder of a small company or you're an organizational leader, and you know that your management or investors are going to want you to do more with less.
Yeah.
How should organizations think about incorporating AI to get that extra output per person?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. In fact, this is, to be honest with you, Tom, this is my bread and butter, right? This is what I do. I help product organizations figure out how they can use AI so their teams can be more effective and efficient. But it's a great question. In fact, I know a lot of CPOs that I talk to who are struggling with this, right? But if it's okay with you, before we go there, do you mind if I just step back? Like, what I have these conversations with CPOs, most of them don't even realize what is the true benefit that they can actually get by having them team level up on AI. So can I just share with you the benefits? Because that will actually help with how do you drive adoption. Yeah. So in my opinion, there's about 5 or 6. I'm going to focus on 3, which I think are most popular ones, right? And you mentioned one of these. One of them is productivity, right? And I don't think people really understand the depth of productivity that you can actually have with this. So, for example, if you can just save 10 hours per week per PM, and by the way, I think 10 hours is the floor, not the ceiling, right? If you just save 10 hours per week per PM, and if you have a small team of about 20 PMs, right? That is an equivalent of actually having an extra 4 to 5 people capacity for the whole year. And by the way, that, like I said, is the floor, not the ceiling. Yeah. Imagine what you can do if you had 4 or 5 extra PMs in your team without actually having extra headcount. I mean, Tom, think about it. You and I at Google, how many times do we fight for headcount?
Often.
Right? And imagine what we could, and we would fight for like one person or two people, right? Just so that we can actually have them do more strategic work or spend more time with customers, because we were just drowning in things. But the level of productivity itself is surprising. And when I do these free assessments for CPOs, and then we do an ROI, and I show them an ROI, and they're like, just their eyes like, Mustafa, how fast can we do this? Right? So number one is the productivity itself is amazing. The second part of this, which I think is slowly people are starting to realize, is that it's actually going to help them drive a bigger impact. Like when you have an extra capacity, right? You can actually now have your PMs do the things that you want your PMs to do. You want them to talk to customers. You want them to work on strategic initiatives, right? You want them to go and do more testing and do more prototyping. And so all of those things will drive a bigger impact, which ultimately, as a CPO, you should actually have dollar signs in your head, because bigger impact means better for your product. And personally, that's a bigger bonus, right?
Yeah.
And the third one is that you're actually going to have happier PMs. Like you and I have worked over weekends so many times just because we have so much to do, right? And work-life balance is out the door for PMs. And so now you actually have happy PMs, which means your retention is better. And when your retention is better, the cost of hire is lower. And so the benefits just keep going down and down and down. And so when I talk to CPOs and then I share them, I do a quick assessment with them and I tell them, are your PMs doing this? And they're like, we're not even touching it. It's the way you're doing it themselves. And then I'm like, well, let's talk about the benefit. And then suddenly the dollar signs come in, right? And so I think first understanding what is on the table is just as important, because if you're not using AI effectively, you're leaving a lot of money on the table, right? But with that being said, coming to your other question, is adoption is hard, right? Like for CPOs, they really are kind of stuck in this dynamic. And we have a 3-step process to help them through. But put yourself in their position, right? You have a group of PMs. You have a small group of PMs who are like, we need this now. Like, why are we not using more and more AI, right? You have another group of PMs who are like, AI is going to take my jobs away, so I'm not even going to touch it. And then have people in the middle. And so now you have this dynamic of how do you manage this group of different people with different wants, fears. So number one, that you have to figure that out, right? Number two is, despite where you are in that subsection of groups, the way they are using AI is, in my opinion, extremely ineffective, right? We just saw the difference between what a top PM does versus everyone else. And so they're all using what I call the most sub-efficient way of doing AI, and which is why they're actually not seeing huge productivity benefits. The third challenge CPOs have is that there's some legitimate trust issues, right? Like you and I use AI every day, so we have gotten to the point in which we know when to trust AI and when not to trust AI, and we kind of know when it's faking it. But for people who don't do it every day, like I spend like probably 4 or 5 hours a day on AI, which is probably, I'm sure there's eventually some doctors going to come out with some kind of sickness and label it. But for people who are just starting off, there's some significant trust issues that they have to get over, right? And so CPOs have to manage all of these things, and then they have to drive adoption, and then they have to justify the ROI, and why it's going to cost this much, and so on and so forth. So they are really it's a tough place to be. And so what I've found, and this is going back to my IBM days, is that I usually did a 3-step process, right? Number one is you got to bring everybody on the same page. So you get your entire team and you just get them a level up on how to use AI and how to be more practical, right? And maybe get some quick wins out of it. Like, oh, you know what? Look, I did customer release notes. And now I don't have to spend 2 hours a week doing customer release notes, and that's a win. Or, you know what? We can now actually write our PRDs much faster. So whatever it is. So step one is just get everybody on the same page, right? The second part of this is that even if you get everybody kind of on the same page, you know how this is, right? You spend all that time getting people, or spend all that money getting people on the same page, and some people are going to use it, some people are kind of going to use it, and some people are not going to use it. And so you have this weird adoption curve, or you have this weird usage curve in which you have 60% of your PM population kind of using it, 20% like is fish to water, and the other 20% is they're not even using it. So then you actually have to do stage 2, which is you have to drive adoption. And this is classic change management, in which, you know, you have to provide them with support, you have to have evangelists, you have to have champions. You have to be able to make it so that AI becomes a habit. And that's really where you want to get to, because that's when you start unlocking those benefits that I just talked about. And then the third step is, you're not done yet in step 2. The third step is when you really start to want to codify the new ways of working. And that's when, Tom, you start putting in new processes, new tools, new playbooks. You may have to reorganize your teams a little bit differently, because now AI is collapsing some of the roles. And so, but most of my clients are not at stage 3. Most of my clients are either stage 1 and stage 2, simply because we're just starting off in that journey. But at each stage, you are unlocking more and more of the value that we talked about earlier. Right? Does that make sense, Tom?
It does. It does. And it makes me wonder about, actually, I was having a conversation earlier today with a CEO who was looking for help with their product organization. And they said to me, oh, you know, we don't have a very big product team, and you know, not as large as the ones that you've worked on before. And I said, you know, it's okay. You don't need that many PMs like you used to.
No.
And I wanted to run a hypothesis I have by you, which is that I actually think a really high performing product team in 2025 has a very seasoned, experienced PM leader at the top, but then may only have a handful of senior ICs like L5, L6 who know how to use AI well. And that squad might produce more impact than the traditional VP of product, bunch of GPMs, bunch of ICs, a couple of APMs. Like, I'm curious, like, what do you think is like the optimal structure? Because it seems like the ratios might be evolving.
So I think there's multiple ways. And of course, Tom, you know this, it really depends on the product and the complexity and the type of organization that you have, right? I do think that you probably may not need as many layers like what you just talked about earlier. And so I think the layers are shrinking. I also think that the capacity of one PM now handling multiple products becomes easier, right? So having a high-performing IC is better than actually having a team of PMs doing that. I also do think that the way the interactions between PMs, designers, and engineers changes, to be honest with you. And so I think you can actually move faster. In fact, one of the other benefits that we didn't talk about is that by actually having better quality requirements that are first generated by AI, then vetted by the senior PM, and then socialized with the engineering team, actually reduces a lot of rework. And you know this as much as I do, is the rework is the reason why things become so slow, right? And so you can actually now streamline that entire way of, you can actually release features much faster, right? And so when you think about all of those forces, you are looking at a very impactful PM organization that can actually drive a fair amount of results, and especially business results, simply because they're now empowered by almost, I hate to use this word, but it's almost like a second brain, right? Now, I will say that one of the other questions I get, especially when we talk about the new org structure, is like, well, does this mean that I need less PMs? And I actually think it's the opposite, right? Think about it. Tom, what is the hardest thing in an organization? Right? It's the engineering, it's the building.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually where the most of the cost is. That's where most of the people is, because building is hard.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But what happens when building becomes easy?
You might end up with a lot of unneeded features.
Yes. So deciding on what to build becomes even more important.
Mm-hmm.
And guess who decides what to build?
Now this is where I might take a different view. I would say a small handful of experienced ICs powered by, augmented with AI may have better judgment than a larger number of PMs also augmented by AI, just
Right.
because
So
we'd be able to.
again, can I change your context just a little bit?
Yeah, yeah.
Because your answer is correct if you're thinking about the number of products remain the same.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But imagine if building becomes easier, how much more products and things you can do now, because you can expand your market much faster. And now suddenly that container that you're talking about, like, yes, if you're only going to focus on one product, maybe you don't need that many people, right?
Mm-hmm.
But imagine that now you can go to adjacent markets and you can go there much faster. And now instead of one product, you're now supporting 4 products. The ratio, you always are going to need a PM and a designer, but number of engineers that you have are going to be less and less, right? Because that trifecta remains the same. So in your context, if you had only Google only had one small product, it makes sense. But you have to now think about is that we're living in a different world in which anybody can build something, test it out, enter different markets,
Mm-hmm.
and exit really fast, right? And now suddenly you need people to manage that ship.
Yeah, so if I were to play that back, I think what I'm hearing is your prediction is the number of features and products per company is going to go up quite significantly.
Yes.
Yeah. And because of that, you're going to need these PM designer pairings to cover that broader suite of products and features.
Yeah. Listen, companies, you know this. I mean, we work for very ambitious companies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Companies always want to get into new markets.
Yeah.
And what's always holding it back is because they know that from a technical perspective, it's a pain in the you-know-what to build. That pain in the you-know-what is becoming easier and easier.
So if we were to play that out, let's fast forward, and now you have as many, if not more, companies doing way more per company.
Yeah.
Tons of choice for customers.
Yes.
But maybe fewer blockbuster hits then, in terms of like the winners, or do you think it's still the power law? Like what happens when there's
I actually think that what we'll end up having is much more customized point solutions for different segments of the market.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, think about, you know what's a good parallel? Our good friend YouTube. YouTube has the same content, but it has the same video for different audiences all the time. Right? It can teach you how to do X, Y, and Z, but it can teach you how to do X, Y, Z if you're a mom, if you're a dad, if you're an 8-year-old, if you're a 20-year-old, if you are, you name it. The segmentation, the long tail is huge.
Yeah.
And so I see parallels there. I see parallels in which now you're going to have these niche products that are going to serve really well this very small micro segment. But these micro segments there's a lot of riches, right? They say there's riches in the niches. But you can do that. And by the way, to understand that market, to be able to come up with a micro segment, to be able to really prove that this is going to be value to that segment, you need to have somebody figure out what that is, right? And in my mind, the PMs are the best place to go through that, right? Suddenly, what to build becomes so much more important.
Yeah.
Because right now, organizations spend way too much time on like, how are you going to build this?
So in that world where, and I tend to agree with you that we're likely going to see this longer tail of technology tools and products that are highly customized or targeted. I wonder from an investor point of view, your unicorn opportunity it seems like it will be harder. Because while there will still be these power law outcomes, there's going to be this thriving, sustainable long tail where, there's not going to be one dominant CRM program.
No.
There's going to be a CRM program for dentists and one for lawyers.
Yes, very much so. I mean, you'll always have the big companies like Salesforce that will try to do a little bit of everything, right? In which they'll have different products for different sectors, which is right now in most large organizations, when I was at Cloud and even with IBM, we had financial services, and within financial services, we had bank, insurance companies, and then we had size of banks, like small banks, large banks, medium-sized banks. I think you're always going to have like the big Googles and the IBMs of the world, in which you are going to have these products that are niche focused or micro focused, but they cover too many niches, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to actually have just these, super hyper specific products in which they're going to focus just on one niche, and that's all they do.
Yeah.
And I think that you're going to see that happen. And I think companies in the middle, on the other hand, are the ones that I am worried about.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I think the large companies should be able to take their money and spread it out across different niches and be able to be profitable. The super small niche is going to have a really small cost structure, and they should be able to enjoy profitability. If the people in the middle, they will have to decide either to get eaten up by a big guy or break up into smaller companies. Does that?
Yeah, that resonates.
Listen, you and I should have a whole session just on investing.
Seriously. Yeah. And it reminds me of why, like, I've invested in a few companies, and one of them that I really have confidence in is they've gone very, very specific around a particular customer type and industry.
Yeah.
And what they've done is, instead of expanding wider, saying like, oh, we'll do the same problem for another adjacent industry, they've kind of gone vertical, which is like, okay, we're going to stay with this in this industry, but now in addition to CRM, we're also going to do like the accounting. And then we're also going to do the marketing, and we're also going to do the recruiting. And it's like a complete full stack solution for this very narrow industry.
Yeah. And it actually makes sense too, at least that's the way I see it, is because when you're selling to two different segments, your sales and marketing is now split. So the budget that you have for sales and marketing has to now go for dentist, and let's just say now you're going to podiatrist. I don't know why I picked podiatrist. But now you're selling the same solution to two different segments, and so your marketing and sales is very different. Right. Yeah. And so your cost structure is very different. But if you're just going after dentists and you're doing like, I'm going to start with solution point A, and then I'm going to do B, C, D, E, and F. Now suddenly to a dentist, I become more and more valuable. Yeah. Right. And so your marketing and sales is very different there. And so your cost structure is very different.
Mustafa, I feel like, we could go on for quite some time about this. We'll have to do another episode down the road.
Yes. Yes.
But I did want to wrap with asking you, like, hey, how can people? Well, number one, I suspect some people watching this are going to be like, how do I get my hands on that playbook so I can copy and paste into Claude? But yeah, how can people stay in touch with you and kind of learn more about you and get your help down the road?
So two ways. Number one is I offer, so especially if you're a product leader that has a team of at least 20 people, 20 PMs, I offer a free assessment. It's a free 30-minute assessment in which we actually go through and take a look at what your team's doing and how they can actually use AI more effectively and even come up with an ROI. So if they're interested in doing that, I only offer this, I only offer like 5 or 10 seats in the whole quarter. So if somebody's interested, they're welcome to do that. And Tom, I'll send you the link so they can just use that to schedule some time. Yeah. So that's number one. Number two is you can always, I run a Substack just like you, Tom, in which I put all my content out. Like I probably do about, I really have an open kimono policy. Just like it must be the Google mindset in which we share everything, right? I probably put like 90 to 95% of all my content out there, in which I talk about the how-tos if you're a PM, and a how-to if you're a CPO. And so they can go to that one, and you can just go to echo-point.com for that Substack. So in both ways, they can do that. And the best thing is, I love people connecting me on LinkedIn. So if you're listening to this episode and you want to talk to me, or you just want to connect so you can get all my free stuff, just send me a link or send me an invite, and I would love to connect, right? And Tom, I'll send you all these links so that you can put it in the show.
Yeah, I'll drop them in the description for the replay guys.
Yeah, but yes, 3 things. Like if they want a free assessment, if you want to just connect with me on my Substack, and if you just want to connect with me on LinkedIn, each and every way is okay. I'm just happy to hear from people. So
love it. Mustafa,
Perfect.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
This is great, Tom. I'm glad that we're finally doing it. I'm glad we connected post Google. But you and I need to do another episode on investing. I know you and I have talked about it.
Yeah.
Now we need to book it, right?
This time
I'm going to invite you on my podcast.
So. Sounds like fun. And what's the name of your podcast so people can subscribe?
So if you go to Substack, it's all on Substack itself, right? So I publish everything on Substack.
All right.
But it's called Masters of Product. And so we talk a lot about product, but we also talk a lot about product and where to invest. So
I love it. 2 of my favorite topics. All right,
Perfect.
Mustafa. I'll catch you later, buddy.
Thank you very much. Bye for now, Tom.
Bye. All right. That was fun. Let me give you some takeaways. Takeaway 1 is when you're using Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini, I'm a big believer in garbage in, garbage out. So the more gold you can put in, the more gold you can get out. So take the time to write detailed prompts, like it's smart enough to understand. And the more guidance you can give it, the less kind of like cookie cutter a response you're going to get. And it's just worth it. Now, the other thing is, if you find that you're doing certain things over and over, take the time to copy and paste that thing and put it into a Google Doc so that you have your own cheat sheet, or you can use Mustafa's playbook, or you can maybe use a combination. So gold in, gold out is takeaway 1. Takeaway 2 is I really am curious about how the future of product teams are going to get structured. And I'm a big believer in a very small, experienced leadership team at the top and a nice torso of experienced ICs. And maybe that's all you need. Maybe 1 or 2 early career folks. But most of the action is, I think, going to be done by those L5s, L6s. And I'm not sure how that bodes for earlier career PMs. Like, because if you're listening to this and you're like, okay, well, I'm an L3 or I'm an APM. What do I do? Well, you could start companies. You could go to startups that are going to hire those 1 or 2 early career folks. And you could find some good senior ICs to work under. But I think the key takeaway there is the super skill for PMs is going to be folks who know how to use AI and know how to call bull crap on AI. who know how to take that output and be like, this is really good, and there's 2 massive blind spots, and then you're going to correct it, and then it's going to say, oh, sorry, you're right, blah, blah, blah. But if you're not pushing back on your AI on a regular basis, there's a good chance you're kind of taking a lot of chaff with your wheat. So that's takeaway 2, which is this leaning out of the traditional product team where you got a couple of, top dogs and then a bunch of, running backs. You maybe, okay, let's use a football analogy. All you really need is you need a quarterback, couple wide receivers, a couple of running backs. That's all you need, really. Then maybe when you get bigger, you need an offensive coordinator. But that small team of 4 or 5 killer PMs, man, they're probably going to be able to support at least 5 products total, like 1 product each. And some of them are going to be able to handle 2 or 3 products each. So that's nutty and exciting. And I think the other, maybe last takeaway is it's okay because there's going to be a lot more companies to work at. However, I think that long tail that Mustafa and I discussed is going to be there's going to be a lot of, call it 10 to $30 million a year companies. And maybe that's okay though, because you might get better work-life balance. You'll become an expert in that customer. Those customers are going to be long-term, because if they lean into you and you provide the full stack to them, it's not going to be like they're going to change it every other month or something. So yeah, hopefully this has been useful to you. If you need any one-on-one coaching for your product career, or you are a CEO, CPO, and you need some kind of expert consulting at the organizational level, you can reach out to me, but also Mustafa does it as well. And hopefully this is helpful, and let's get back to work. Bye, team.